Hi, my name is Marcelo Aller, and today we're going to be talking about in this podcast the science of physiological data and how it relates to health, happiness, and performance. Today, I'm really looking forward to introducing Scott Damman. He's the CEO and co-founder of MoveFactorX. Scott is, for me, the epitome of an entrepreneur that has trailblazed in an industry, movement, specifically around movement sensors and looking at performance analysis and challenging the status quo in taking a different perspective on data sets specifically. So I'm really looking forward to talking about assessment, movement in sports and daily life, looking at really groundbreaking tools such as a ballistic medicine ball, the data that you can get and you can deliver now in a decentralized approach that's actionable. It gives you power outputs, talks about segmental movement in a really unique way when we're looking at eccentric and concentric contraction. Scott's expertise really goes beyond athletics too. Most recently, he's really positioned the company to look at the health space as well, because movement is movement. And I think this is a discussion that we've had often about enhancing healthy aging and fall prevention, looking at public health, looking at what he does for his community as well. He's really inspired and drive real change in physical, and it really relates to making this accessible uh, to everyone, looking at the older adults, looking at the entry-level athletes as well. So with no further ado, would love to hand it off to Scott. I think to get us started, you recently came back from the health event, and I think let's start from the top and then let's go back down and see the journey. So um, how was that? What was your learning? I know that most recently you've had some updates. So let's hear it from you, Scott.
Sure. Appreciate you having me on today, Marcella. I think definitely through the years of knowing each other, I should say decades, have a joint appreciation for challenging the status quo, really understanding the context of what we're trying to accomplish with training and its application of technology within that. And so kind of your point on health. I look at like this human performance paradigm, right? So we kind of have that general population, we have sport performance, but it's all human performance. And the health was the big innovation for healthcare. It was a couple weeks back in Las Vegas, and this is a massive show. And when you step into there and you're outside of your sport performance box, you recognize all the different intricacies that are involved in like process technology, like how to make systems work better within healthcare. But on top of that, how do we improve patient outcomes? How do we take more of an evidence-based approach to do that? And so the contribution of MoveFactorX, taking our know-how and experience from that sport performance side and applying it to this general population part of human performance, that's why we were at health, and we really were exploring those opportunities to see where we may be a good fit to impact change.
So to add to that, maybe you want to talk about a little bit how athletes approach training and recovery, and specifically as they get older. Because I think you've asked the question in a different way. Because if you look at the dogma, let's talk about that industry again. That's kind of been taught down and slowed to change. Let's be honest. I've had this discussion with a lot of other colleagues in the industry. Um, they tend to take research sometimes and they ask the same questions, or um, the original intent of the study got proven wrong. So we start from scratch again, because at the end of the day, that's what science is. So can you talk about that approach of training and how it relates to that spectrum that you just identified? Because you've seen Olympic athletes use your product, but then you've also had products like this on, let's say, an elderly individual in their 80s or 90s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when you're speaking to the dogma, are you kind of talking about where we get stuck in the mud with our
Yeah.
typical strength and conditioning?
Yep. Correct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is, boy, I mean, that's a whole conversation there. And there's really some good qualified people that are strength and conditioning coaches that can talk about why they feel the industry's got stuck in the mud. I look at it, as an innovator technologist, where we're trying to drive innovation to improve outcomes. Right? I'll give
Mhm.
you a great example. I don't think there's any coach that denies rate of force development. RFD is crucial to sport performance. Identifying, programming for, and improving rate of force development, and making sure that those training outcomes fit transfer to the sporting task. Would you say there's much debate on that
No, I think that's the
topic?
ultimate goal. That's the ultimate goal, right? Is to create the twitchiest, most explosive athlete that I can create via
So I
speed or via power.
absolutely, and so we know that's the goal. Coaches will talk about it, but yet why are we stuck in VBT, average velocity, where we look
Yeah.
at the whole
Uh,
range of motion of a non explosive movement in many ways, like a bench press or a squat, where the VBT assessment is the start of the range of motion concentrically to the end. It's an average over that time versus actually parsing out that explosive property, how that athlete pops out of the hole.
so
Like that.
you're saying it's not about the whole part. It's about the first 100 seconds or 200 seconds, or because that's really what you've identified, in your system, looking at the pop 100 value, that speed and time that took place from the ground force and up.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, we know that like anybody that ever pulled horses or a load before recognizes it's not necessarily the horsepower of your pickup truck, it's the torque, right? How do you get that mass moving? And that's what RFD is about in sport performance. Yet we still rely on kind of this old legacy metric that's been
Yeah,
around for
but my
decades.
miles per gallon.
There you go. You
Yeah.
know, it's I mean it's analogous to like the 40. It's analogous to jump height. Everybody wants to measure jump height. It's easy, but it's not a performance indicator. And so I
Yeah.
know you were wanting me to kind of talk a little bit about your question was to move it into like the sports side into health, but like I think that
Both relate. Movement is movement. You said it,
they
you
sure
know?
do. You
Uh,
coming out of the chair as a 90-year-old person is rate of force development.
Yeah.
And do you have to have some kind of rocking movement strategy to get yourself up, or do you have the ability to ground yourself and come out of the chair? You
Yeah.
know, I,
Do you have,
I, when people ask me, I've had these great conversations on airplanes, and people will be like, "So, what do you do?" And I'm not typically sure where to take it, and I talk to them about their life a little bit and try to weave it into that, and really talking about movement performance. And a lot of people, of course, like there's this appeal of working with professional athletes. People think that's cool, right? But when I explain to them that sport performance is human performance just at a different level, the same assessment and the training strategies we're putting in to make a professional world class athlete more explosive is the same fundamentals, the same foundation is helping someone get out of the chair. And when you explain that to them in just a couple of minutes, they totally get it and that message resonates.
yeah, because at the end of the day, like, going back to that, what we just said, movement is movement for an elderly individual and for an athlete. And you're looking at movement, or right? So you're looking at how they generate force, and how they then move from inertia and how they absorb force as well. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
you basically have these metrics in your software, as well as on that's gathered from the sensor that you have. I actually have it, a sensor like this,
Yeah,
uh, or the ballistic medicine ball. I also have that, but it's actually, I just used it this morning and it's outside.
great.
Um,
That's where it
so
belongs, thrown outside.
yeah, yeah. And what I like the most out of it, and I recently did this product review and I posted it on my YouTube channel, and it looked at a metric that I did pre and then post. And the reason why I did post is because, as you're aware, I shared with you that I had a knee injury and I'm about 7 weeks out now. And I'm actually back, knock on wood, pain-free, able to do one-legged squats, but I've been using it just exactly for that biofeedback to see
Mhm.
the progress that I'm making. So like I look at the first 100 seconds of movement, which in your system is pop 100, but then I also look at how well I'm absorbing force, and I realize that my breaks are still, it's interesting because in therapy, right, the application to a PT would be like, hey, you get to see that your breaks are not there. So it's like I still need to uh, take more time, but like it qualifies progression in a workout, and I feel like that's where we're seeing this. And it's interesting that you went to that, kind of circling back to the health event for a second. Do you feel like Pete, like any the medical professionals that you did interact with, because I know you're part of a group that you've done some testing with, have they received how were they receptive to the data and how you positioned it in regards to your athletic history of using this with like Olympic athletes and NFL and Major League Baseball athletes and all the professionals that you work with?
Yeah, I mean, keep in mind, first of all, that health innovation conference, I believe there was like 500 or 600 companies there, right? So it's like across the span. So we were very niche in what we were offering and kind of a fresh lens on actually
Mhm.
looking at movement performance. The things, Marcel, that are obvious to you and I are newer concepts to healthcare because there is a lot of objective measurement right now to quote unquote validate outcomes. It's just weak sauce. And so I think that the industry is going to be very open with the whole trend of value based care that
Yeah.
is, I believe, turns 3 the end of this year, and it's been a little bit slow to get going. But that's kind of how the culture moves. But we're tracking to be a real viable solution within that value-based care. So I think it's gonna take a little while, But if you look at it like when you look at like the market and back on kind of this movement performance, whether it's general population or more sport, think about the private pay side. You have your chiropractic clinic or your physical therapy clinic or your health and wellness or maybe even concierge medicine, where they are taking a more proactive approach. And maybe they will be those early adopters on the healthcare side that say, hey, we need to look at a movement health assessment, like biometrics around how do we stand, how do we function, how do we load eccentrically and transition that load back concentrically, right? Like we're here to make movers.
Hmm.
Isn't that what it is? We're
Yeah.
here to make movers. And so I do think there's a very promising opportunity, and it's very logical to transition the know-how that we have from the MoveFactorX from the sport performance side.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing and just to add to that is kind of the context, right? It's still in its infancy, and it's just kind of a head scratcher because we've like you've identified, we've been knowing each other for some time, but like we've seen the Google's birth, we've seen the advent of smartphones and what it's done
Mm-hmm.
through business development side, and how it's changing the market space now. And I think the portability, I think the ability to have something that can be done anywhere, it doesn't have to be done in an office any longer, is going to be the next that future, I think, and where I think every professional is wanting that ability to be able to not have it set in a room. um, I think you're a great example in that you've identified that early on because when you launched this device or this concept, the traditional metrics was a linear transducer,
Right,
and at best maybe a force platform.
right.
So do you feel like there's been much change, much progress?
Well, gosh, you're roping me back into your opener on dogma. I let me backtrack on that a little bit because there's no doubt in my mind the future, like today, the near term future is IMU technology, like the MoveFactorX inertial measurement unit. You put it up less than 1 ounce of ultra
Yeah.
portable movement sensor technology. Computer vision or markerless mocap, as some people in our space refer to, is
Uh,
another area that's really going to emerge. That's the future. IMU in computer vision. The dogma has us still holding on these string-based units, right? That yes, do they work to give you like displacement or distance and average velocity? Sure, they're very good. But why are we stuck in this methodology that's like decades old? I kind of use the example in the last 5, 6 years, within sport performance, the team space, anywhere from professional sport down to high school youth athletic development, there's been a rapid adoption of buying the tech. Every coach, which one's the best? Is this one better than this one? Nobody asked the question, how should I use this technology? So they ask, what is the best one? So they end up buying a piece of tech. So we have this rapid adoption, but yet we're stuck in methodology that traces back to the 70s and 80s. And a lot of Brian Mann's work within about the last 20 years. And by the way, Brian Mann has told me directly, he's like, I didn't recognize my work to be taken as gospel.
It's interesting. He's had the effect of what I would say Dr. Karonian has done for heart rate training. 220 minus your age was never meant to be used that way. And I think Dr. Mann was just trying to identify muscle profiling.
Yes.
And it was used. It's been used incorrectly. It's a great tool, but to your point, it looks at the average being done, and that's not really reflective of kinetic movement, right?
I think going back to that thing is like we have the rapid adoption. We're stuck in this like legacy methodology, and that's the part that's like mind bending to me. We now, like with our technology, some other technologies, like you mentioned, that initial 100 milliseconds, the first 0.1 second of the movement is our POP 100 metric. We identify your force and velocity very early, and then the 200 milliseconds, and then the rest of the range of motion, which quite frankly, I don't give a rat about, but we're still looking at that end resultant. It's everything you do early that creates that end resultant. The action happens early. And the thing that I've actually learned, where I've actually gone a little bit backwards, is, okay, I thought POP 100 was very novel because no one was looking at that RFD. Well, now we've recognized it's the inverse POP 100. It's your velocity or the force in the late stage of the eccentric phase that sets up the concentric phase, right? And so, like,
slingshot.
Yeah,
it's like, it's like, how good are you at being able to, I love the feedback because I could see it. And then a lot, like I could now being hurt and recovering from medial meniscal tear, and I get it. It's like when you're slow, like Charles Poliquin said, it's like shooting a cannon from a canoe.
There you go. Yep.
And if you're not, if you don't have a good, strong base, or if you don't build the power on top of something stable, you're just going to break. So, but having biofeedback is, and it's not measuring everything either. That's the other thing that annoys the daylights out of me. I've had conversations, and to your point, coaches get all this technology. They're measuring over 3 million data points, but they've correlated that it's only 3 metrics that are worth tracking because it actually has a true impact on outcomes.
But going back to like your example of the canoe, if you think about it, like a lot of athletes, if they're judged on that concentric phase, they will slow roll or control roll their eccentric phase to put themselves in a strong position to be quote unquote strong. That's not sport. Like these are not power lifters, right? These are movers. They have to brake rapidly and reaccelerate. They have to have the Barry Sanders factor. And so I want to challenge an athlete to say, hey, when you load fast, let's just say you have a monitoring load of maybe 135 on, and you're having them load fast to hit a certain velocity threshold on that eccentric phase, you have to demonstrate now what you can do concentrically with that control on the eccentric side. And even if you're hitting a certain threshold on that eccentric side and your concentric's dropping a little bit, that's okay if you look at the modern approach to understanding movement performance and the feedback, because you want to look at that late eccentric to early concentric. That's the body of work. That's change of direction. And so we're missing that point.
Can you give us a little bit more context to that? I know there's been some coaches like Dr. Sato that you talk to that shares certain targets. Can you give like how he uses it in a sense to, is it a 0.5? Is it a 0.8? A lot of people always have these training metrics, but can you talk to like what you should be normally seeing?
Well, I don't want to speak for a coach, but I can, from an overview, tell you Sensei Sato has changed my worldview on the modern application. And he isn't looking at velocity zones. I can tell you that. I won't share Sensei Sato's secrets because he has clinics and does coaching education for that. Um, but it's not velocity zones. It's not an emphasis on average
So
velocity.
do we want to see a faster time, I guess, on a pop 100 after you hit a specific uh, in inverse pop number? What's a happy medium?
Yeah, okay. Well, so that would be outside my lane. I measure stuff, right? So the modern coaches will take a look at that. I will share with you something that I learned to kind of validate where we're headed with the inverse pop 100 from an NFL director of speed. It's a very speed oriented team. He said to me, "We've learned. Keep in mind these are world class athletes, right? These are the top.
Yeah.
That the concentric phase, no matter what we do with the stimulus, is pretty much the same. The special athletes on the field show up late eccentric." And he said, your inverse pop 100 is spot on. And so
Wow.
they're programming that part of the range of motion.
Yeah.
And again, that is obvious to me. I struggle personally, but I've accepted it now. That why doesn't the industry understand this, and why is the industry still so stuck in the mud with zones and trying to make these micro changes like on load and things like that? It just doesn't matter.
That's a really good question. I think it's that going back to that dogma. I had a talk with a friend of mine, Don Moxley, and I did a podcast with him talking about this concept of dogma, and it's and he was the Ohio State's first sports scientist for their Big Ten
Mm-hmm.
wrestling program when they won the Big Ten title, and he looked at over 3 million data points, and they pretty much had identified like 3 to 4 key metrics after that.
Yeah.
But like, he also mentioned that he had to outsource that data management to like a biometric engineer's grad assistant, and he also outsourced the acquisition part to another grad assistant. The challenge, I think, would change, and the reason why I bring up that story is because they don't have either the tools, and the tools not necessarily is the education, but the manpower. Because I
Mm-hmm.
think technology has been a good thing, but technology has also been a bad thing because it's been slow. I remember when I initially sold systems in, you had to manually download heart rate monitors, at that time, and it took like 3 hours. And I used to always hear grief from everyone, and that was when it was infrared days. Now it's
Yeah.
Bluetooth. Now it's live stream. Now it's 5G, and so like it just these challenges. So like I don't want to continue. Like I hope coaches don't take this like we're bashing them. We're just identifying and acknowledging that there is a problem in the market space, and it's largely due, and it's changing. I think maybe NIL hopefully will throw some money towards coaches, as far as the strength and conditioning side, or athletes value those coaches and maybe give them an additional salary. But it is a challenge to change an environment.
Yeah.
I also feel like the research is kind of beating a dead horse sometimes. And
Yeah.
yeah, I'm probably putting myself off a target here because I know a lot of the PhDs that do the research, but I think the newer generation, I think it's also a generational thing. I'm happy to say this, the Gen Zs or the younger generation coaches are asking better questions and are more open to being trailblazers. Um, what are your thoughts on that? Do you feel like it's generational? Because I mean, we grew up during some big dogs names. Let's be honest. Al
Yeah.
Vermeil, Coach Vern Gambetta. They're all heroes in my eyes. I stand on their shoulders, but like I think they were misinterpreted, and I think there was a generation me that's part of me as well that is kind of interpreted incorrectly.
Yeah, no, totally. Your question comment there just makes my mind spin. I think that like I'm in this space to make an impact. We want to help athletes reach their performance goals with movement sensor technology, the application we can provide, right? We want to make you break faster, explode faster. There's a lot of complexity behind our product, but the message is really kind of simple. And maybe I don't do a great job of marketing that simplicity, and we'll work on that going into 2025 because the actual feedback is incredibly powerful, but you made an opening statement where you talked about challenging the status quo. If you say that, like, there may be strength coach listening to this right now and being disgruntled, or this is one of those unpopular opinion, I don't give a shit. Like,
I don't
I'm
believe you.
here to innovate, to make an impact, to help the athlete reach their movement performance goals. And I'm not a coach. I don't understand all the intricacies of how you manage your workflow and all that kind of stuff. My goal here is to provide practicality and, quite frankly, like, skip all the minutiae you go through. I'm going to share a local story where there was a high school coach that learned about us, invited me in. They ended up buying MoveFactorX. They were evaluating every product, demoing every LPT and whatnot, right? And so I just went in there. I went higher level because we are about, I hate to say higher level because that is the reality, right? Is to make movers. I'm not going to talk about velocity zones. I'm not going to talk about average velocity. So we go in. He has one of his stud football players, I think the kid was a junior last year, does some squats. We get the feedback. He wants to see the average velocity. Then he pulls out this book. It's got all these sheets in it, and he's going down, matching stuff up. And he's like, yep, we were right there. It was more important for him to validate that that load matched the grid that came back from this old zone thing, Marcelo. And you've known me enough. Like, you can imagine me standing there watching that, and I'm like, I just had nothing to say at that point. But, like, to me, that's where the point hits you is, gosh, I feel for this coach because he is dedicated to making improvements. He's following the dogma because he wants to be influenced, but he's being influenced by disingenuous influencers or people that are just not up to speed with the content.
I think what's going to end up happening is I think we need to get an applied decentralized trial approach to strength and conditioning. I think in order for this to change, I would love to see a better relationship between exercise science educational departments and the good programs do this, by the way, like UConn, Notre Dame, Texas, Alabama. They openly integrate. Ohio State, they bring in all across departments and they try to engage the students because that's true education, right? That's true change. But I think you hit the nail right on the head. It's like these coaches, they work damn hard. You know, and what ends up happening though is that they are either very burdened, or are just not motivated because unfortunately, they went in thinking that this would give them a certain type of lifestyle, only to realize that maybe the average salary was like 45,000 or 50,000, and they're like, "Wow, I got a degree and I want this to be more rewarding because I want to do this for life." And there is that opportunity, but unfortunately, that path is really long, and you have to really understand that. And then at the same time, unfortunately, there is still the environment that is very cliquish sometimes. It shouldn't be that way because it shouldn't have that bias. It should be open a little bit more, but that's what happens sometimes. Unfortunate human behavior can't really modify that. But getting back to uh, your company, and I think I would love for everyone to understand a little bit. You've been you've co-founded this company, but you're a serial entrepreneur. Can you talk about a little bit about what other entrepreneurs or other business owners have to keep in mind when you're in the trenches? Like that's the best way to describe it. Yeah, Susan Meth. Yeah, she was the good memory. That was cutting edge. Yeah, yeah. We did that we did an markered analysis of posture. We did gas analysis at that time. We were personal trainers, folks. Um, uh, and and we then looked at as well blood work at that time, which now it's current. And we had also recommended at that time sports psychology. Well, not it wasn't really called sports psychologist, but a shrink. But this was, keep in mind, folks, $45,000 to be a member. So the e-club was not like, of course, you were going to get this type of concierge service and this assessment. And at that time, Polar's body age system, which was HRA, Force Platform, uh, it incorporated Skinfold, but we used your BIA measurements manually. We inputted. It had a slew of HRAs, and based on the lifestyle choices of that individual, they would have a biological age compared to their chronological age. And the pitch was, sir, you're 50 years old. Wouldn't you want to be 35 on your next birthday? These are the things you need to do for those outcomes. We need to improve. So yeah, it was a big thing for you. Yeah, you're like, I'm going to see a movie. Yeah, yeah, he's now in Aura. He's with Aura right now. Yeah, shout out to Aura. Yeah, yeah, I was the first accelerometer. Yeah, I was a PE major. I think also there's a community out there that's tech phobic or has looked at research and interpreted, well, I just got to intend to move fast, right? But we all know eventually what the coach's eye takes so many years to develop, and it's a powerful tool. But like an entry level coach, you could help them by teaching that their coach's eye might not be accurate yet because what a real athlete might look like compared to an athlete that looks it, but your coaching eye can't detect it. And I think data quantifies things. And I think it's not there to replace anyone, it's there to augment what they're trying to do, but also having a history of it. So uh, I still, when a coach tells me no, 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 I just sit there and I'm like, you got to have something that basically proves or shows and tracks and trends your system in some capacity. If you're making these statements about recommending this type of training style, and I think Coach Frankel, who was at Beaver Fitness, who was at TRX, who was a researcher that I met a long time ago, really talks to this all the time when he talks, which is exactly that. It's like, measure what you're going to do. You're saying that this is going to cause this. Show me it. And I loved him for it because that's where, like, when I was selling heart rate monitors and we were talking about trim scoring, show me that. Yeah, yeah. I've had a coach and a sports scientist friend of mine say muscles don't have eyeballs. So I thought that was amazing because he's like conjugate guy. Like, it doesn't matter. Muscles don't have eyeballs. It's, at the end of the day, movement. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I still have my units. I had the strength for power unit and then I also had the running solution that you guys had as well. So if people don't like, if Scott will, if you follow him on Twitter, he'll actually post some of Dr. Sato's work, and I always love it. Thank God there's a translate feature for in Twitter because he everything's in Japanese. So it's like, but like then it translates. It's kind of cool. Like there's an example of large learning models and being able to update us and connect coaches around the world. And I agree with you. If I had during that time, I would say Coach Boyle, Juan Carlos Santana, Vernon Gambetta, Al Vermeil, and then for me, the other guy would be Charles Poliquin, God rest his soul. Um, those five probably had the largest influence on me as far as strength and conditioning wise, and or performance and program design. Had me because they all read research, but they also applied it, and most of them are authors, and most of them have talked about it, but also have trained so many people. It was very, very cool. There's some other people that are in my top 10. Coach Rooney, Coach DeFranco, Bill Parisi, guys that are active now in the industry. And these are like probably 8 coaches that have impacted the industry and have challenged the status quo. And I think they've gone on and have sustained a long career because they have challenged, they haven't stuck with, they're not trying to get along. They are trying to push that boundary. I feel like on a tech side, I think we both have contributed to that. Um, I feel like we have. I think to be involved in this game for this long and to promote the health and well-being, because that's really what we're looking at. It's health. How can we improve health? How can you measure health? How can you train with this value in a meaningful way? I've measured my father. I've measured who's 87, and myself, and then younger athletes. And movement is movement. Heart rate is heart rate. Physiological expenditures. If you've identified by age, by gender, that's a network. You definitely have you have the crux of creating an algorithm if you think of it in a very different way. But a lot of coaches are still challenged with it. I would say it's progressed. But I think the biggest part that I think we could learn is, or suggest for entrepreneurs, is to be open. But I also think to prove the model first, as opposed to trying to put the cart in front of the horse, because we both have seen companies that have not stood the test of time. Yeah. Yeah. What's the future? Yeah, yeah, and it's no reoccurring SaaS fees either. Yeah, it's a good, better, best model. I mean, I think the companies have to have a app to begin with, you know, in just basic, off the shelf, gives you data. You can do a basic report with it. Outside of that, to your point, yeah, any additional insights, um, you know, using maybe AR, VR concepts, that's an additional, I could see charging for that, or having AI come in and be able to program some things from protocols, but leaving the agency still to the professional. Because I think that's where I think the future is going. Overall, I think it's really great to see the next steps. I think that I think would be appropriate to kind of to sum this all up for us, and to leave people with is, where do you see in 2025 your focus being? So where would, and how can people find out about your company and the products if they're looking for more information? Great. And where can people find more information about MoveFactorX? Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today. If anyone has questions about this, please leave it in the comments section. If they want to hear other topics that Scott should or myself should talk about, let us know. All right, I stopped recording. I think that went well, man. That was solid 47 minutes. Plenty of content there. Yeah, it's still, something went wrong. Hold on. I'm reloading. So no, it's still running. Oh crap. Reload. Okay, it's still running. Let's hang up, and I will then call you.